Introduction to The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd by D.H. Lawrence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. D.H. Lawrence is one of the most significant of the new generation of writers just beginning to appear in England. One of their chief marks is that they seem to step forward full grown, without a history to account for their maturity. Another characteristic is that they frequently spring from social layers which in the past had to remain largely voiceless. And finally, they have all in their blood what their elders had to acquire painfully, that is, an evolutionary concept of life. 3 years ago the author of The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd was wholly unknown, having not yet published a single work. Today he has to his credit 3 novels, The White Peacock, The Trespasser, and Sons and Lovers, a collection of verse entitled Love Poems, and the play contained in this volume. All of these works, but in particular the play and the latest novel, prove their author a man gifted with strikingly original vision, a keen sense of beauty, an equally keen sense of verbal values, and a sincerity which makes him see and tell the truth where even the most audacious used to falter in the past. Flaubert himself was hardly less free from the old curse of sentimentalizing compromise, and yet this young writer knows how to tell the utmost truth with a daintiness that puts offence out of the question. He was born 27 years ago in a coal miner's cottage at the little colliery town of Eastwood, on the border between Nottingham and Derbyshire. The home was poor, yet not without certain aspirations and refinements. It was the mother who held it together, who saved it from a still more abject poverty, and who filled it with a spirit that made it possible for the boy, her youngest son, to keep alive the gifts still slumbering undiscovered within him. In Sons and Lovers we get the picture of just such a home and such a mother, and it seems safe to conclude that the novel in question is in many ways autobiographical. At the age of 12, the boy won a county council scholarship and came near having to give it up because he found that the £15 a year conferred by it would barely pay the fees at the Nottingham High School and the railway fares to the city. But his mother's determination and self-sacrifice carried him safely past the seemingly impossible. At 16 he left school to earn his living as a clerk. Illness saved him from that uncongenial fate. Instead he became a teacher, having charge of a class of colliers' boys in one of those rough, old-fashioned British schools where all the classes used to fight against one another within a single large room. Before the classes convened in the morning at 8 o'clock, he himself received instruction from the headmaster. At night he continued his studies in the little kitchen at home, where all the rest of the family were wont to foregather. At 19 he found himself, to his own and everybody else's astonishment, the first on the list of the King's Scholarship examination, and from that on he was, to use his own words, considered clever. But the lack of £20 needed in a lump sum to pay the entrance fee at the training college for teachers made it impossible for him to make use of the gained advantage. 2 years later, however, he succeeded in matriculating at the Nottingham Day Training College, but by that time the creative impulse had already begun to stir within him, aided by an early love affair, and so he wrote poems and worked at his first novel when he should have been studying. At 23 he left the college and went to London to teach school, to study French and German, and to write. At 25 he had his first novel, The White Peacock, accepted and printed, but the death of his mother only a month before that event made his victory seem useless and joyless. After the publication of his second novel in 1912, he became able to give up teaching in order to devote himself entirely to his art. Out of that leisure, and perhaps also out of the sorrow caused by the loss of her who until then had been the mainspring of his life, came Sons and Lovers, and the widowing of Mrs. Holroyd. What has struck me most deeply in these two works, apart from their splendid craftsmanship, is their psychological penetration, so closely paralleling the most recent conclusions of the world's leading thinkers. In the hands of this writer, barely emerged out of obscurity, sex becomes almost a new thing. Not only the relationship between man and woman, but also that of mother and child is laid bare in a new light which startles or even shocks, but which nevertheless compels acceptance. One might think that Mr. Lawrence had carefully studied and employed the very latest theories of such men as Freud, for instance, and yet it is a pretty safe bet that most of his studies have been carried on in his own soul, within his own memories. Thus it is proved once more that what the student gropingly reasons out for abstract formulation is flashed upon the poetic dreamer in terms of living reality. Another thing that has impressed me is the aspect in which Mr. Lawrence presents the home life of those hitherto submerged classes which are now at last reaching out for a full share in the general social and cultural inheritance. He writes of that life not only with a knowledge obtained at first hand, but with a sympathy that scorns any apologetic phrase-mongering. Having read him, one feels inclined to conclude, in spite of all conflicting testimony, that the slum is not a location, but a state of mind, and that everywhere, on all levels, the individual soul may create around itself an atmosphere expressive of its ideals. A book like Sons and Lovers ought to go far to prove that most of the qualities held peculiar to the best portion of the ruling classes are nothing but the typical marks of normal humanity. Edwin Bjorkman. End of introduction.
Act 1 of The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd by D.H. Lawrence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Persons.
Holroyd, read by Alan Mapstone.
Mrs. Holroyd, read by Matea Bracic.
Blackmore, read by Kristen Hant.
Jack, read by Larry Wilson.
Minnie, read by Shreya Sethi.
Grandmother, read by Abayi.
Wrigley, read by Alan Mapstone.
Clara, read by Diane Castillo.
Laura, read by Lauren Emma.
Manager, read by Todd.
First Bearer, read by David Purdy.
Second Bearer, read by Chuck Williamson.
Narrator read by Scarbell. The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd. The First Act. Scene 1. The kitchen of a miner's small cottage. On the left is the fireplace, with a deep, full red fire. At the back is a white-curtained window, and beside it the outer door of the room. On the right, 2 white wooden stairs intrude into the kitchen below the closed stair-foot door. On the left, another door. The room is furnished with a chintz-backed sofa under the window, a glass-knobbed painted dresser on the right, and in the center, toward the fire, a table with a red and blue check tablecloth. On one side of the hearth is a wooden rocking chair, on the other an armchair of round staves. An unlighted copper-shaded lamp hangs from the raftered ceiling. It is dark twilight, with the room full of warm fire glow. A woman enters from the outer door. As she leaves the door open behind her, the colliery rail can be seen not far from the threshold, and away back the headstalks of a pit. The woman is tall and voluptuously built. She carries a basket heaped full of washing, which she has just taken from the clothes lines outside. Setting down the basket heavily, she feels among the clothes. She lifts out a white heap of sheets and other linen, setting it on the table. Then she takes a woolen shirt in her hand. Mrs. Holroyd, aloud, to herself.
You know they're not dry even now, though it's been as fine as it has.
She spreads the shirt on the back of her rocking chair, which she turns to the fire. Voice, calling from outside.
Well, have you got them dry?
Mrs. Holroyd starts up, turns and flings her hand in the direction of the open door, where appears a man in blue overalls, swarfed and greased. He carries a dinner basket.
You, I don't know what to call you. The idea of shouting at me like that, like the evil one out of the darkness.
I ought to have remembered your tender nerves. Shall I come in?
No, not for your impudence. But you're late, aren't you?
It's only just gone 6. We electricians, you know, we're the gentlemen on a mine. Ours is gentleman's work. But I'll bet Charles Holroyd was home before 4.
Mrs. Holroyd, bitterly.
Aye, and gone again before 5.
But mine's a lad's job, and I do nothing. Where's he gone?
Mrs. Holroyd, contemptuously.
Dunno. He'd got a game on somewhere, toffed himself up to the nines, and skedaddled off as brisk as a turkey cock.
She smirks in front of the mirror hanging on the chimney-piece, in imitation of a man brushing his hair and mustache and admiring himself.
Though turkey cocks aren't brisk as a rule. Children playing?
Mrs. Holroyd, recovering herself, coldly.
Yes, and they ought to be in.
She continues placing the flannel garments before the fire, on the fender and on chairbacks, till the stove is hedged in with a steaming fence. Then she takes a sheet and a bundle from the table, and going up to Blackmore, who stands watching her, says,
Here, take hold, and help me fold it.
I shall swarf it up.
Mrs. Holroyd, snatching back the sheet.
Oh, you're as tiresome as everybody else.
Blackmore, putting down his basket, and moving to door on right.
Well, I can soon wash my hands.
Mrs. Holroyd, ceasing to flap and fold pillowcases.
That roller towel's ever so dirty. I'll get you another.
She goes to a drawer in the dresser, and then back toward the scullery, where is a sound of water.
Why, bless my life, I'm a lot dirtier than the towel. I don't want another.
Mrs. Holroyd, going into the scullery.
Here you are.
Blackmore, softly, now she is near him.
Why did you trouble now? Pride, you know, pride, nothing else.
Mrs. Holroyd, also playful.
It's nothing but decency.
Blackmore, softly.
Pride, pride, pride.
A child of 8 suddenly appears in the doorway.
Ooh, how dark.
Mrs. Holroyd, hurrying agitated into the kitchen.
Why, where have you been? What have you been doing now?
Jack, surprised.
Why, I've only been out to play.
Mrs. Holroyd, still sharply.
And where's Minnie?
A little girl of 6 appears by the door.
I'm here, ma'am, and what do you think?
Mrs. Holroyd, softening, as she recovers equanimity.
Well, and what should I think?
Oh, yes, ma'am. You know my father?
Mrs. Holroyd, ironically.
I should hope so.
We saw him dancing, ma'am, with a paper bonnet.
What?
There's some women at New Inn what's come from Nottingham.
And he's dancing with the pink one.
Shut up, our Minnie. And they've got paper bonnets on.
All colours, ma'am.
Jack, getting angry.
Shut up, our Minnie. And my dad's dancing with her.
With the pink bonnet one, ma'am.
Up in the club room over the bar.
And she's a lot littler than him, ma'am.
Jack, piteously.
Shut up, our Minnie. And you can see him go past the window, 'cause there isn't no curtains up, and my father's got the pink bonnet one.
And there's a piano, ma'am.
And lots of folks outside watching, looking at my dad. Oh, he can dance, can't he, ma'am?
Mrs. Holroyd. She has been lighting the lamp, and holds the lamp glass.
And who else is there?
Some more men and all the women with paper bonnets on.
There's about 10, I should think, and they say they came in a break from Nottingham.
Mrs. Holroyd, trying to replace the lamp glass over the flame, lets it drop on the floor with a smash.
Ah, there now. Now we'll have to have a candle.
Blackmore, appearing in the scullery doorway with the towel.
What's that? The lamp glass?
I never knowed Mr. Blackmore was here.
Blackmore, to Mrs. Holroyd.
Have you got another?
No.
There is silence for a moment.
We can manage with a candle for tonight.
Blackmore, stepping forward and blowing out the smoky flame.
I'll see if I can't get you one from the pit. I shan't be a minute.
Don't bother. I don't want you to.
He, however, unscrews the burner and goes.
Did Mr. Blackmore come for tea, ma'am?
No, he's had no tea.
I bet he's hungry. Can I have some bread?
Mrs. Holroyd. She stands a lighted candle on the table.
Yes, and you can get your boots off to go to bed.
Ah, it's not even 7 o'clock yet.
It doesn't matter.
What do they wear paper bonnets for, ma'am?
Because they're brazen hussies.
I saw them having a glass of beer.
A nice crew.
They say they are old pals of Mrs. Meakin's. You could hear her screaming and laughing, and my dad says, "Hee-haw, missus! Here, a dog's nose for the Duchess, hoping it'll smell something. What's a dog's nose?"
Mrs. Holroyd, giving him a piece of bread and butter.
Don't ask me, child. How should I know?
Would she eat it, ma'am?
Eat what?
Her in the pink bonnet eat the dog's nose?
No, of course not. How should I know what a dog's nose is?
I bet he'll never go to work tomorrow, Mother. Will he?
Goodness knows. I'm sick of it, disgracing me. There'll be the whole place cackling this now. They've no sooner finished about him getting taken up for fighting than they begin on this. But I'll put a stop to it some road or other. It's not going on if I know it. It isn't.
She stops, hearing footsteps, and Blackmore enters.
Here we are, then. Got one all right.
Did they give it to you, Mr. Blackmore?
No, I took it.
He screws on the burner and proceeds to light the lamp. He is a tall, slender, mobile man of 27, brown-haired, dressed in blue overalls. Jack Holroyd is a big, dark, ruddy, lusty lad. Minnie is also big, but fair.
What do you wear blue trousers for, Mr. Blackmore?
They're to keep my other trousers from getting greasy.
Why don't you wear pit breeches like Dad's?
'Cause he's an electrician. Could you make me a little engine what would make electric light?
I will, some day.
When?
Why don't you come and live here?
Blackmore, looking swiftly at Mrs. Holroyd.
Nay, you've got your own dad to live here.
Minnie, plaintively.
Well, you could come as well. Dad shouts when we've gone to bed and thumps the table. He wouldn't if you was here.
He dursn't.
Be quiet now, be quiet. Here, Mr. Blackmore.
She again gives him the sheet to fold.
Your hands are cold.
Are they? I didn't know.
Blackmore puts his hand on hers. Mrs. Holroyd, confusedly, looking aside.
You must want your tea.
I'm in no hurry.
Selvage to selvage. You'll be quite a domestic man if you go on.
Aye.
They fold the two sheets.
They are white, your sheets.
But look at the smuts on them, look. This vile hole. I'd never have come to live here in all the thick of the pit grime and lonely if it hadn't been for him, so that he shouldn't call in a public house on his road home from work. And now he slinks past on the other side of the railway and goes down to the New Inn instead of coming in for his dinner. I might as well have stopped in Bestwood.
Though I rather like this little place, standing by itself.
Jack, can you go and take the stockings in for me? They're on the line just below the pigsty. The prop's near the apple tree, mind it. Minnie, you take the peg basket.
Will there be any rats, ma'am?
Rats? No. They'll be frightened when they hear you, if there are.
The children go out.
Poor little beggars.
Do you know this place is fairly alive with rats? They run up that dirty vine in front of the house. I'm always at him to cut it down. And you can hear them at night overhead like a regiment of soldiers tramping. Really, you know, I hate them.
Well, a rat is a nasty thing.
But I shall get used to them. I'd give anything to be out of this place.
It is rotten when you're tied to a life you don't like. But I should miss it if you weren't here. When I'm coming down the line to the pit in the morning, it's nearly dark at 7 now, I watch the firelight in here. Sometimes I put my hand on the wall outside where the chimney runs up to feel it warm. There isn't much in Bestwood, is there?
There's less than nothing if you can't be like the rest of them, as common as they're made.
It's a fact, particularly for a woman. But this place is cozy. God love me, I'm sick of lodgings.
You'll have to get married. I'm sure there are plenty of nice girls about.
Are there? I never see 'em.
Oh, come, you can't say that.
I've not seen a single girl, an unmarried girl, that I should want for more than a fortnight. Not one.
Perhaps you're very particular.
She puts her 2 palms on the table and leans back. He draws near to her, dropping his head.
Look here.
He has put his hand on the table near hers.
Yes, I know you've got nice hands, but you needn't be vain of them.
No, it's not that. But don't they seem...
He glances swiftly at her. She turns her head aside. He laughs nervously.
They sort of go well with one another.
They do, rather.
They stand still, near one another, with bent heads for a moment. Suddenly she starts up and draws her hand away.
Why? What is it?
She does not answer. The children come in, Jack with an armful of stockings, Minnie with a basket of pegs.
I believe it's freezing, Mother.
Mr. Blackmore, could you shoot a rat and hit it?
Blackmore, laughing.
Shoot the lot of 'em, like a wink.
But you've had no tea. What an awful shame to keep you here.
Nay, I don't care. It never bothers me.
Then you're different from most men.
All men aren't alike, you know.
But do go and get some tea.
Minnie, plaintively.
Can't you stop, Mr. Blackmore?
Why, Minnie?
So's we're not frightened. Yes, do, will you?
Frightened of what?
'Cause there's noises and rats, and perhaps Dad'll come home and shout.
But he'd shout more if I was here.
He doesn't when my Uncle John's here. So you stop, and perhaps he won't.
Don't you like him to shout when you're in bed?
They do not answer, but look seriously at him. Curtain. Scene 2. The same scene 2 hours later. The clothes are folded in little piles on the table and the sofa. Mrs. Holroyd is holding a thick flannel undervest or singlet which her husband wears in the pit, and which has just dried on the fender. Mrs. Holroyd, to herself.
Now thank goodness they're all dried. It's only 9 o'clock, so he won't be in for another 2 hours. The nuisance.
She sits on the sofa, letting her arms hang down in dejection. After a minute or two she jumps up, to begin rudely dropping the piles of washed clothes in the basket.
I don't care. I'm not going to let him have it all his way. No.
She weeps a little, fiercely, drying her eyes on the edge of her white apron.
Why should I put up with it all? He can do what he likes. But I don't care. No, I don't.
She flings down the full clothes basket, sits suddenly in the rocking chair, and weeps. There is the sound of coarse, bursting laughter, in vain subdued, and a man's deep guffaws. Footsteps draw near. Suddenly the door opens, and a little, plump, pretty woman of 30, in a close-fitting dress and a giddy, frilled bonnet of pink paper, stands perkily in the doorway. Mrs. Holroyd springs up. Her small, sensitive nose is inflamed with weeping. Her eyes are wet and flashing. She fronts the other woman. Clara, with a pert smile and a jerk of the head.
Good evening.
What do you want?
Oh, we've not come begging. This is a visit.
She stuffs her handkerchief in front of her mouth in a little snorting burst of laughter. There is the sound of another woman behind going off into uncontrollable laughter, while a man guffaws. Mrs. Holroyd, after a moment of impotence, tragically.
What?
Clara, faltering slightly, affecting a polite tone.
We thought we'd just call.
She stuffs her handkerchief in front of her explosive laughter. The other woman shrieks again, beginning high, and running down the scale.
What do you mean? What do you want here?
Clara, she bites her lip.
We don't want anything, thanks. We've just called.
She begins to laugh again. So does the other.
Well, I don't think much of the manners in this part of the country.
She takes a few hesitating steps into the kitchen. Mrs. Holroyd, trying to shut the door upon her.
No, you are not coming in.
Clara, preventing her closing the door.
Dear me, what a to-do.
She struggles with the door. The other woman comes up to help. A man is seen in the background.
My word, aren't we good enough to come in?
Mrs. Holroyd, finding herself confronted by what seems to her excitement a crowd, releases the door and draws back a little, almost in tears of anger.
You have no business here. What do you want?
Clara, putting her bonnet straight and entering in brisk defiance.
I tell you, we've only come to see you.
She looks round the kitchen, then makes a gesture toward the armchair.
Can I sit here?
She plumps herself down.
Rest for the weary.
A woman and a man have followed her into the room. Laura is highly colored, stout, some 40 years old, wears a blue paper bonnet, and looks like the landlady of a public house. Both she and Clara wear much jewelry. Laura is well dressed in a blue cloth dress. Holroyd is a big blond man. His cap is pushed back, and he looks rather tipsy and lawless. He has a heavy blond mustache. His jacket and trousers are black, his vest gray, and he wears a turned-down collar with dark bow. Laura, sitting down in a chair on right, her hand on her bosom, panting.
I've laughed till I feel fair bad.
Haven't you got a drop of nothing to offer us, meester? Come, you are slow. I should have thought a gentleman like you would have been out with the glasses afore we could have got breaths to ask you.
Holroyd, clumsily.
I dunna believe there's out in the house but a bottle of stout.
Clara, putting her hand on her stomach.
It feels as if the kettle's going to boil over.
She stuffs her handkerchief in front of her mouth, throws back her head, and snorts with laughter, having now regained her confidence. Laura laughs in the last state of exhaustion, her hand on her breast.
She'll take it then.
What do you say, Laura? Are you having a drop?
Laura, submissively and naturally tongue-tied.
Well, I don't mind. I will if you do.
Clara, recklessly.
I think we'll have a drop, Charlie, and risk it. It'll happen all the rest down.
There is a moment of silence while Holroyd goes into the scullery. Clara surveys the room and the dramatic pose of Mrs. Holroyd curiously. Holroyd, suddenly.
Hey, what? Come here.
There is a smash of pots, and a rat careers out of the scullery. Laura, the first to see it, utters a scream, but is fastened to her chair, unable to move. Clara jumps up to the table, crying.
It's a rat! Oh, save us!
She scrambles up, banging her head on the lamp, which swings violently. Mrs. Holroyd, who, with a little shriek, jerks her legs up onto the sofa where she was stiffly reclining, now cries in despairing falsetto, stretching forth her arms.
Ah! The lamp! Mine! The lamp!
Clara steadies the lamp and holds her hand to her head. Holroyd, coming from the scullery, a bottle of stout in his hand.
Where is he?
I believe he's gone under the sofa. My, and he's a thumper, if you like, as big as a rabbit.
Holroyd advances cautiously toward the sofa. Laura, springing suddenly into life.
Hi, let me go. Don't touch him. Where is he?
She flees and scrambles onto Clara's armchair, catching hold of the latter's skirts.
Hang off. Do you want to have a body down? Mind, I tell you.
Mrs. Holroyd, bunched up on the sofa, with crossed hands holding her arms, fascinated, watches her husband as he approaches to stoop and attack the rat. She suddenly screams.
Don't, he'll fly at you.
He'll not get a chance.
He will, and they're poisonous.
She ends on a very high note. Leaning forward on the sofa as far as she dares, she stretches out her arms to keep back her husband, who is about to kneel and search under the sofa for the rat.
Come off, I can't see him.
I won't let you, he'll fly at you.
I'll settle him.
Open the door and let him go.
I shanna. I'll settle him. Shut thy claver. He'll none come anigh thee.
He kneels down and begins to creep to the sofa. With a great bound, Mrs. Holroyd flies to the door and flings it open. Then she rushes back to the couch.
There he goes!
Holroyd, simultaneously.
Oi, Uzzah!
He flings the bottle of stout out of the door. Lara, piteously.
Shut the door, do.
Holroyd rises, dusting his trousers' knees, and closes the door. Lara heavily descends and drops in the chair.
Here, come and help us down, Charlie. Look at her. She's going off.
Though Lara is still purple-red, she sinks back in the chair. Holroyd goes to the table. Clara places her hands on his shoulders and jumps lightly down. Then she pushes Holroyd with her elbow.
Look sharp. Get a glass of water.
She unfastens Lara's collar and pulls off the paper bonnet. Mrs. Holroyd sits up, straightens her clothing, and tries to look cold and contemptuous. Holroyd brings a cup of water. Clara sprinkles her friend's face. Lara sighs and sighs again very deeply, then draws herself up painfully. Clara, tenderly.
Do you feel any better? Shall you have a drink of water?
Lara mournfully shakes her head. Clara turns sharply to Holroyd.
She'll have a drink of something.
Holroyd goes out. Clara meanwhile fans her friend with a handkerchief. Holroyd brings stout. She pours out the stout, smells the glass, smells the bottle, then finally the cork.
Eh, mister, it's all of a work. It's at a foisty cork.
At that instant the stair-foot door opens slowly, revealing the children, the girl peering over the boy's shoulder, both in white nightgowns. Everybody starts. Lara gives a little cry, presses her hand on her bosom, and sinks back, gasping. Clara, appealing and anxious, to Mrs. Holroyd.
You don't happen to have a drop of brandy for her, do you, missus?
Mrs. Holroyd rises coldly without replying, and goes to the stair-foot door where the children stand. Mrs. Holroyd, sternly, to the children.
Go to bed.
What's the matter, Mother?
Never you mind. Go to bed.
Clara, appealingly.
Be quick, missus.
Mrs. Holroyd, glancing around, sees Lara going purple, and runs past the children upstairs. The boy and girl sit on the lowest stair. Their father goes out of the house, shamefaced. Mrs. Holroyd runs downstairs with a little brandy in a large bottle.
Thanks awfully.
To Lara.
Come on, try and drink a drop. There's a dear.
They administer brandy to Lara. The children sit watching, open-eyed. The girl stands up to look. Minnie, whispering.
I believe it's Bluebonnet.
Jack, whispering.
It isn't. She's in a fit.
Minnie, whispering.
Well, look under the table.
Jack peers under.
There's a bonnet.
Jack creeps forward.
Come back, our Jack.
Jack returns with the bonnet.
It's all made of paper.
Let's have a look. It's stuck together, not sewed.
She tries it on. Holroyd enters. He looks at the child. Mrs. Holroyd, sharply, glancing round.
Take that off.
Minnie hurriedly takes the bonnet from her head. Her father snatches it from her and puts it on the fire.
There, you're coming round now, love.
Mrs. Holroyd turns away. She sees Holroyd's eyes on the brandy bottle and immediately removes it, corking it up. Mrs. Holroyd, to Clara.
You will not need this any more?
No, thanks. I'm very much obliged.
Mrs. Holroyd does not unbend but speaks coldly to the children.
Come, this is no place for you. Come back to bed.
No, Mama, don't want to.
Mrs. Holroyd, contralto.
Come along.
I'm frightened, ma'am.
Frightened? What of?
Ooh, there was a row.
Mrs. Holroyd, taking Minnie in her arms.
Did they frighten you, my pet?
She kisses her. Jack, in a high whisper.
Mother, it's Pink Bonnet and Blue Bonnet what was dancing.
Minnie, whimpering.
I don't want to go to bed, ma'am. I'm frightened.
Clara, who has pulled off her pink bonnet and revealed a jug-handle coiffure.
We're going now, Ducky. You're not frightened of us, are you?
Mrs. Holroyd takes the girl away before she can answer. Jack lingers behind.
Now then, get off after your mother.
Jack, taking no notice of his father.
I say, what's a dog's nose?
Clara ups with her handkerchief, and Laura responds with a faint giggle.
Go thy way upstairs.
It's only a small whiskey with a spoonful of beer in it, my dog.
Oh!
Come here, my dog. Come on.
Jack, curious, advances.
You'll tell your mother we didn't mean no harm, won't you?
Jack, touching her earrings.
What are they made of?
They're only earrings. Don't you like them?
He stands surveying her curiously. Then he touches a bracelet made of many little mosaic brooches.
This is pretty, isn't it?
Clara, pleased.
Do you like it?
She takes it off. Suddenly Mrs. Holroyd is heard calling, Jack, Jack. Clara starts.
Now then, get off.
Clara, as Jack is reluctantly going.
Kiss me good night, ducky, and give this to your sister, shall you?
She hands Jack the mosaic bracelet. He takes it doubtfully. She kisses him. Holroyd watches in silence. Lara, suddenly, pathetically.
Aren't you going to give me a kiss and all?
Jack yields her his cheek, then goes. Clara to Holroyd.
Aren't they nice children?
Aye.
Clara, briskly.
Oh dear, you're very short all of a sudden. Don't answer if it hurts you.
My, isn't he different?
Holroyd, laughing forcibly.
I'm no different.
Yes, you are. You shouldn't have brought us here if you was going to turn funny over it.
I'm not funny.
No, you're not.
She begins to laugh. Laura joins in spite of herself.
You're about as solemn as a roast potato.
She flings up her hands, claps them down on her knees, and sways up and down as she laughs, Laura joining in, hand on breast.
Are you ready to be mashed?
She goes off again, then suddenly wipes the laughter off her mouth, and is solemn.
But look here, this'll never do. Now I'm going to be quiet.
She prims herself.
That'd happen better.
Oh, indeed. You think I've got to pull a mug to look decent? You'd have to pull a big un at that rate.
She bubbles off, uncontrollably, shaking herself in exasperation meanwhile. Laura joins in. Holroyd leans over close to her.
That's got plenty of fizz in these, seemly.
Clara, putting her hand on his face and pushing it aside, but leaving her hand over his cheek and mouth like a caress.
Don't. You've been drinking.
She begins to laugh.
Should we be going then?
Where do you want to take us?
Oh, you please yourself at that. Come on with me.
Clara, sitting up prim.
Oh, indeed.
Holroyd, catching hold of her.
Come on, let's be moving.
He glances apprehensively at the stairs.
What's your hurry?
Holroyd, persuasively.
Come on, we.
I don't think.
She goes off, uncontrollably. Holroyd, sitting on the table just above her.
What's the use of sitting here?
I'm very comfy, I thank thee.
Thou art a baffling little hussy.
Clara, running her hand along his thigh.
Aren't you having nothing, my dear?
Offers him her glass. Holroyd, getting down from the table and putting his hand forcibly on her shoulder.
Nah, come on, let's shift.
Clara, struggling.
Hands off.
She fetches him a sharp slap across the face. Mrs. Holroyd is heard coming downstairs. Clara, released, sits down, smoothing herself. Holroyd looks evil. He goes out to the door. Clara, to Mrs. Holroyd, penitently.
I don't know what you think of us, I'm sure.
I think nothing at all.
Clara, bubbling.
So you fix your thoughts elsewhere, do you?
Suddenly changing to seriousness.
No, but I have been awful tonight.
Mrs. Holroyd, contralto, emphatic.
I don't want to know anything about you. I shall be glad when you go.
Turning out time, Laura.
Laura, turtling.
I'm sorry, I'm sure.
Never mind. But as true as I'm here, missus, I should never have come if I'd thought. But I had a drop. It all started with your husband saying he wasn't a married man.
Laura, laughing and wiping her eyes.
I've never known her to go off like it. It's after the time she's had.
You know, my husband was a brute to me, and I was in bed 3 months after he died. He was a brute, he was. This is the first time I've been out. It's almost the first laugh I've had for a year.
It's true what she says. We thought she'd go out of her mind. She never spoke a word for a fortnight.
Though he's only been dead for 2 months, he was a brute to me. I was as nice a young girl as you could wish when I was married him and went to the Fleece Inn. I was.
Killed herself drinking. And she's that excitable, she is. We'll still have an awful time with her tomorrow, I know.
Mrs. Holroyd, coldly.
I don't know why I should hear all this.
I know I must have seemed awful. And them children, aren't they nice little things, Laura?
They are that.
Holroyd, entering from the door.
And are you about done there?
My word, if this is the way you treat a lady when she comes to see you.
She rises.
I'll see you down the line.
You're not coming astride with us.
We've got no hat. Neither of us.
We've got our own hair on our heads, at any rate.
Drawing herself up suddenly in front of Mrs. Holroyd.
And I've been educated at a boarding school as good as anybody. I can behave myself either in the drawing-room or in the kitchen, as is fitting and proper. But if you'd buried a husband like mine, you wouldn't feel you'd much left to be proud of, and you might go off occasionally.
I don't want to hear you.
Clara, bobbing a curtsy.
Sorry I spoke.
She goes out stiffly, followed by Laura. Holroyd, going forward.
You mun mind points down the line.
I thank thee, Charlie. Mind thy own points.
He hesitates at the door, returns and sits down. There is silence in the room. Holroyd sits with his chin in his hand. Mrs. Holroyd listens. The footsteps and voices of the 2 women die out. Then she closes the door. Holroyd begins to unlace his boots. Holroyd, ashamed yet defiant, withal anxious to apologize.
Where's my slippers?
Mrs. Holroyd sits on the sofa with face averted and does not answer.
Dost hear?
He pulls off his boots noisily and begins to hunt under the sofa.
I canna find the things.
No answer.
Then I'll do be out 'em.
He stumps about in his stocking feet. Going into the scullery, he brings out the loaf of bread. He returns into the scullery.
Where's the cheese?
No answer. Suddenly,
God blast it.
he hobbles into the kitchen.
I've trod on that broken basin and cut my foot open.
Mrs. Holroyd refuses to take any notice. He sits down and looks at his sole, pulls off his stocking and looks again.
It's lamed me for life.
Mrs. Holroyd glances at the wound.
Aren't that going to get me out for it? Oh, all right then.
He hops to the dresser, opens a drawer, and pulls out a white rag. He is about to tear it. Mrs. Holroyd, snatching it from him.
Don't tear that.
Holroyd, shouting.
And what the deuce am I to do?
Mrs. Holroyd sits stonily.
Oh, all right then.
He hops back to his chair, sits down, and begins to pull on his stocking.
All right then, all right then.
In a fever of rage, he begins pulling on his boots.
I'll go where I can find a bit of rag.
Yes, that's all you want. All you want is an excuse to be off again. A bit of rag.
Holroyd, shouting.
And what man would want to stop with a woman sitting as frow as a jackass, and canna get a word from her edgeways?
Don't expect me to speak to you after tonight's show. How dare you bring them to my house? How dare you?
They've none hurt your house, have they?
I wonder you dare to cross the doorstep.
I shall do what the deuce I like. They're as good as you are.
Mrs. Holroyd stands speechless, staring at him. Then low.
Don't you come near me again.
Holroyd suddenly shouting to get his courage up.
She's as good as you are, every bit of it.
Mrs. Holroyd blazing.
Whatever I was, and whatever I may be, don't you ever come near me again.
What? I'll show thee. What's the hurt to you if a woman comes to the house? They're women as good as yourself, every whit of it.
Say no more. Go with them then, and don't come back.
What? Yeah, I will go, and you shall see. What? You think you're something. Since your uncle left you that money, and Blackymore putting you up to it, I can see your little game. I'm not as daft as you imagine. I'm no fool, I tell you.
No, you're not. You're a drunken beast, that's all you are.
What? What? I'm what? I'll show you who's gaffer, though.
He threatens her. Mrs. Holroyd, between her teeth.
No, it's not going on. If you won't go, I will.
Go then, for you've always been too big for your shoes in my house.
Yes, I ought never to have looked at you. Only you showed a fair face then.
What? What? We'll see who's master in this house. I tell you, I'm gonna put a stop to it.
He brings his fist down on the table with a bang.
It's going to stop.
He bangs the table again.
I've put up with it long enough. Do you think I'm a dog in the house and not a man, do you?
A dog would be better.
Oh, then we'll see. We'll see who's the dog and who isn't. We're gonna see.
He bangs the table.
Stop thumping that table. You wakened those children once, you and your trollops.
I shall do what the deuce I like.
No more you won't. No more. I've stood this long enough. Now I'm going. As for you, you've got a red face where she slapped you. Now go to her.
What? What?
For I'm sick of the sight and sounds of you.
Holroyd, bitterly.
My God, and I've known it for a long time.
You have, and it's true.
And I know who it is they're anchoring after.
I only want to be rid of you.
I know it mighty well, but I know him.
Mrs. Holroyd, sinking down on the sofa, suddenly begins to sob half hysterically. Holroyd watches her. As suddenly, she dries her eyes.
Do you think I care about what you say?
Suddenly.
Oh, I've had enough. I've tried for years for the children's sakes. Now I've had enough of your shame and disgrace.
Oh, indeed.
Mrs. Holroyd, her voice is dull and inflexible.
I've had enough. Go out again after those trollops. Leave me alone. I've had enough.
Holroyd stands looking at her.
Go, I mean it. Go out again. And if you never come back again, I'm glad. I've had enough.
She keeps her face averted, will not look at him, her attitude expressing thorough weariness.
All right, then.
He hobbles in unlaced boots to the door. Then he turns to look at her. She turns herself still farther away so that her back is toward him. He goes. Curtain. End of Act 1. Act 2 of The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd by D.H. Lawrence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The second act. The scene is the same, 2 hours later. The cottage is in darkness, save for the firelight. On the table is spread a newspaper. A cup and saucer, a plate, a piece of bacon in the frying tin are on the newspaper ready for the miners' breakfast. Mrs. Holroyd has gone to bed. There is a noise of heavy stumbling down the 3 steps outside.
Steady now, steady. It's all in darkness. Mrs., has she gone to bed?
He tries the latch, shakes the door. Holroyd's voice. He is drunk.
Has locked me out. Let me smash that bloody door in. Come out, Ussa.
He strikes a heavy blow on the door. There is a scuffle.
Hold on a bit. What are you doing?
I'm smashing that blasted door in.
Mrs. Holroyd, appearing and suddenly drawing the bolts, flinging the door open.
What do you think you're doing?
Holroyd, lurching into the room, snarling.
What? I thought they'd play their monkey tricks on me, did her?
Shouting.
But I'm gonna show thee.
He lurches at her threateningly. She recoils. Blackmore, seizing him by the arm.
Here. Come and sit down and be quiet.
Holroyd, snarling at him.
What? And what's that got to do with it?
Shouting.
What's that got to do with it?
Nothing. But it's getting late and you want your supper.
Holroyd, shouting.
I want nout. I'm allowed nout in this house.
Shouting louder.
Her begrudges me every morsel I have.
Oh, what a story.
Holroyd, shouting.
It's the truth and you know it.
Blackmore, conciliatory.
You'll rouse the children. At this hour.
Holroyd, suddenly quiet.
Not me. Not if I know it. I shan't disturb 'em, bless 'em.
He staggers to his armchair and sits heavily.
Shall I light the lamp?
No, don't trouble. Don't stay any longer. There's no need.
Blackmore, quietly.
I'll just see it's all right.
He proceeds in silence to light the lamp. Holroyd is seen dropping forward in his chair. He has a cut on his cheek. Mrs. Holroyd is in an old-fashioned dressing gown. Blackmore has an overcoat buttoned up to his chin. There is a very large lump of coal on the red fire.
Don't stay any longer.
I'll see it's all right.
I shall be all right. He'll go to sleep now.
But he can't go like that.
What has he done to his face?
He had a row with Jim Goodwin.
What about?
I don't know.
The beast.
By Jove, and isn't he a weight? He's getting fat. Must be.
He's big made. He has a big frame.
Whatever he is, it took me all my time to get him home. I thought I'd better keep an eye on him. I knew you'd be worrying, so I sat in the smoke room and waited for him. Though it's a dirty hole, and dull as hell.
Why did you bother?
Well, I thought you'd be upset about him. I had to drink 3 whiskeys. Had to, in all conscience.
Smiling.
I don't want to be the ruin of you.
Blackmore, smiling.
Don't you? I thought he'd pitch forward onto the lines and crack his skull.
Holroyd has been sinking farther and farther forward in drunken sleep. He suddenly jerks too far and is awakened. He sits upright, glaring fiercely and dazedly at the two, who instantly cease talking. Holroyd to Blackmore.
What are thou doing here?
Why, I came along with you.
That a liar. I'm only just come in.
Mrs. Holroyd, coldly.
He's no liar at all. He brought you home because you were too drunk to come yourself.
Holroyd, starting up.
That a liar. I never set eyes on him this night afore now.
Mrs. Holroyd, with a pff of contempt.
You don't know what you have done tonight.
Holroyd, shouting.
I shall not have it, I'll tell thee. I shall not have it. I shall have no carrying on in my house.
Mrs. Holroyd, shrugging her shoulders.
Talk when you've got some sense.
Holroyd, fiercely.
I've as much sense as that. Am I a fool? Can I see? What's he doing here then? Answer me that. What?
Mr. Blackmore came to bring you home, because you were too drunk to find your own way, and this is the thanks he gets.
Holroyd, contemptuously.
Blackymore, Blackymore. It's him that cuts thy cloth by, is it?
Mrs. Holroyd, hotly.
You don't know what you're talking about, so keep your tongue still.
Holroyd, bitingly.
I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about, don't I? And what about him standing there then, if I don't know what I'm talking about? What?
You've been to sleep, Charlie, and forgotten I came in with you not long since.
I'm not daft. I'm not a fool. I got eyes in my head and sense. You needn't try to get over me. I know what you're up to.
Blackmore, flushing.
It's a bit off to talk to me like that, Charlie, I must say.
I'm not good enough for her. She wants Mr. Blackymore. He's a gentleman, he is. And now we have it all. Now we understand.
I wish you understood enough to keep your tongue still.
What? What? I'm to keep my tongue still, am I? And what about Mr. Blackymore?
Mrs. Holroyd, fiercely.
Stop your mouth, you vulgar, low-minded brute.
Am I? Am I? And what are you? What tricks are you up to and all? But that's all right, that's all right.
Shouting.
That's all right if it's you.
I think I'd better go. You seem to enjoy calumniating your wife.
Holroyd, mockingly.
Calumniating? Calumniating? I'll give you calumniating, you mealy-mouthed jockey. I'll give you calumniating.
I think you've said about enough.
Have I? Have I, you flimsy jack? Have I?
In a sudden burst.
But I've not done with thee yet.
Blackmore, ironically.
No, and you haven't.
Holroyd, shouting, pulling himself up from the armchair.
I'll show thee! I'll show thee!
Blackmore laughs.
Yeah, my young monkey. It's that, is it?
Yes, it's me.
Holroyd, shouting.
And I'll make thee wish it weren't, I will. What? What? Tha'd come slithering round here, would ta?
He lurches forward at Blackmore with clenched fist.
Drunken fool! Oh, don't!
Holroyd, turning to her.
What?
She puts up her hands before her face. Blackmore seizes the upraised arm and swings Holroyd round. Blackmore, in a towering passion.
Mind what thou'rt doing.
Holroyd, turning fiercely on him, incoherent.
What?
He aims a heavy blow. Blackmore evades it so that he is struck on the side of the chest. Suddenly he shows his teeth. He raises his fists, ready to strike Holroyd when the latter stands to advantage. Mrs. Holroyd, rushing upon Blackmore.
No, oh no!
She flies and opens the door and goes out. Blackmore glances after her, then at Holroyd, who is preparing, like a bull, for another charge. The young man's face lights up.
What?
As he advances, Blackmore quickly retreats out of doors. Holroyd plunges upon him. Blackmore slips behind the door jamb, puts out his foot, and trips Holroyd with a crash upon the brick yard.
Oh, what has he done to himself?
Blackmore, thickly.
Tumbled over himself.
Holroyd is seen struggling to rise, and is heard incoherently cursing.
Aren't you going to get him up?
What for?
But what shall we do?
Let him go to hell.
Holroyd, who had subsided, begins to snarl and struggle again. Mrs. Holroyd, in terror.
He's getting up.
All right, let him.
Mrs. Holroyd looks at Blackmore, suddenly afraid of him also. Holroyd, in a last frenzy.
I'll show thee,
He raises himself up, and is just picking his balance when Blackmore, with a sudden light kick, sends him sprawling again. He is seen on the edge of the light to collapse into stupor.
He'll kill you! He'll kill you!
Blackmore laughs short.
Would you believe it? Oh, isn't it awful?
She begins to weep in a little hysteria. Blackmore stands with his back leaning on the doorway, grinning in a strained fashion.
Is he hurt, do you think?
I don't know. I should think not.
I wish he was dead. I do, with all my heart.
Do you?
He looks at her quickly. She wavers and shrinks. He begins to smile strainedly as before.
You don't know what you wish or what you want.
Mrs. Holroyd, troubled.
Do you think I could get past him to come inside?
I should think so.
Mrs. Holroyd, silent and troubled, maneuvers in the doorway, stepping over her husband's feet, which lie on the threshold.
Why, you've got no shoes and stockings on.
No.
She enters the house and stands trembling before the fire. Blackmore, following her.
Are you cold?
A little, with standing on the yard.
What a shame.
She, uncertain of herself, sits down. He drops on one knee awkwardly and takes her feet in his hands.
Don't.
They are frightfully cold.
He remains with head sunk for some moments, then slowly rises.
Damn him.
They look at each other, then, at the same time, turn away.
We can't leave him lying there.
No. I'll bring him in.
But
he won't wake again. The drink will have got hold of him by now.
He hesitates.
Could you take hold of his feet? He's so heavy.
Yes.
They go out and are seen stooping over Holroyd.
Wait till I've got him. Half a minute.
Mrs. Holroyd backs in first. They carry Holroyd in and lay him on the sofa.
Doesn't he look awful?
It's more Mark than Mar. It isn't much, really.
He is busy taking off Holroyd's collar and tie, unfastening the waistcoat, the braces, and the waist buttons of the trousers. He then proceeds to unlace the drunken man's boots. Mrs. Holroyd, who has been watching closely.
I shall never get him upstairs.
He can sleep here with a rug or something to cover him. You don't want him upstairs?
Never again.
Blackmore, after a moment or two of silence.
He'll be all right down here. Have you got a rug?
Yes.
She goes upstairs. Blackmore goes into the scullery, returning with a lading can and towel. He gets hot water from the boiler. Then, kneeling down, he begins to wipe the drunken man's face lightly with the flannel, to remove the blood and dirt. Mrs. Holroyd, returning.
What are you doing?
Only wiping his face to get the dirt out.
I wonder if he'd do as much for you.
I hope not.
Isn't he horrible? Horrible.
Blackmore looks up at her.
Don't look at him, then.
I can't take it in. It's too much.
He won't wake. I will stay with you.
Mrs. Holroyd, earnestly.
No. Oh, no.
There will be the drawn sword between us.
He indicates the figure of Holroyd, which lies, in effect, as a barrier between them. Mrs. Holroyd, blushing.
Don't.
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Holroyd, after watching him for a few moments lightly wiping the sleeping man's face with a towel.
I wonder you can be so careful over him.
Blackmore, quietly.
It's only because he's helpless.
But why should you love him ever so little?
I don't. Only he's helpless. 5 minutes since, I could have killed him.
Well, I don't understand you, man.
Why?
I don't know.
I thought as I stood in that doorway and he was trying to get up, I wished as hard as I've ever wished anything in my life.
What?
That I'd killed him. I've never wished anything so much in my life, if wishes were anything.
Don't. It does sound awful.
I could have done it, too. He ought to be dead.
Mrs. Holroyd, pleading.
No, don't. You know you don't mean it, and you make me feel so awful.
I do mean it. It's simply true what I say.
But don't say it.
No?
No, we've had enough.
Give me the rug.
She hands it to him, and he tucks Holroyd up.
You only do it to play on my feelings.
Blackmore, laughing shortly.
And now give me a pillow. Thanks.
There is a pause. Both look at the sleeping man.
I suppose you're fond of him, really.
No more.
You were fond of him?
I was, yes.
What did you like in him?
Mrs. Holroyd, uneasily.
I don't know.
I suppose you really care about him, even now?
Why are you so sure of it?
Because I think it is so.
I did care for him. Now he has destroyed it.
I don't believe he can destroy it.
Mrs. Holroyd, with a short laugh.
Don't you? When you are married, you try. You'll find it isn't so hard.
But what did you like in him? Because he was good-looking and strong and that?
I like that as well. But if a man makes a nuisance of himself, his good looks are ugly to you, and his strength loathsome. Do you think I care about a man because he's got big fists, when he is a coward in his real self?
Is he a coward?
He is. A pettifogging, paltry one.
And so you've really done with him?
I have.
And what are you going to do?
I don't know.
I suppose nothing. You'll just go on. Even if you've done with him, you'll go on with him.
There is a long pause.
But there was nothing else in him but his muscles and his good looks to attract you to him?
Why? What does it matter?
What did you think he was?
Why must we talk about him?
Because I can never quite believe you.
I can't help whether you believe it or not.
Are you just in a rage with him because of tonight?
I know. Tonight finished it. But it was never right between us.
Never?
Not once. And then tonight, no, it's too much. I can't stand any more of it.
I suppose he got tipsy. Then he said he wasn't a married man, vowed he wasn't to those paper bonnets. They found out he was and said he was frightened of his wife getting to know. Then he said they should all go to supper at his house. I suppose they came out of mischief.
He did it to insult me.
Oh, he was a bit tight. You can't say it was deliberate.
No, but it shows how he feels toward me. The feeling comes out in drink.
How does he feel toward you?
He wants to insult me and humiliate me in every moment of his life. Now I simply despise him.
You really don't care any more about him?
No.
Blackmore hesitates.
And you would leave him?
I would leave him, and not care that about him any more.
She snaps her fingers.
Will you come with me?
Mrs. Holroyd, after a reluctant pause.
Where?
To Spain. I can any time have a job there in a decent part. You could take the children.
The figure of the sleeper stirs uneasily. They watch him.
Will you?
When would you go?
Tomorrow, if you like.
But why do you want to settle yourself with me and the children?
Because I want to.
But don't you love me?
Why don't I?
You don't.
I don't know about that. I don't know anything about love. Only I've gone on for a year now and it's got stronger and stronger.
What has?
This wanting you to live with me. I took no notice of it for a long time. Now I can't get away from it, at no hour and no how.
He still avoids direct contact with her.
But you'd like to get away from it.
I hate a mess of any sort, but if you'll come away with me, you and the children.
But I couldn't. You don't love me.
I don't know what you mean by I don't love you.
I can feel it.
And do you love me?
A pause.
I don't know. Everything is so...
There is a long pause.
How old are you?
32.
I'm 27.
And have you never been in love?
I don't think so. I don't know.
But you must know. I must go and shut that door that keeps clicking.
She rises to go upstairs, making a clatter at the stair-foot door. The noise rouses her husband. As she goes upstairs, he moves, makes coughing sounds, turns over, and then suddenly sits upright, gazing at Blackmore. The latter sits perfectly still on the sofa, his head dropped, hiding his face. His hands are clasped. They remain thus for a minute.
Hello.
He stares fixedly.
Hello.
His tone is undecided, as if he mistrusts himself.
Water.
Blackmore does not move. Holroyd stares blankly. He then turns and looks at the room.
Well, I don't know.
He staggers to his feet, clinging to the table, and goes groping to the stairs. They creak loudly under his weight. A door latch is heard to click. In a moment, Mrs. Holroyd comes quickly downstairs.
Has he gone to bed?
Mrs. Holroyd, nodding.
Lying on the bed.
Will he settle now?
I don't know. He is like that sometimes. He will have delirium tremens if he goes on.
Blackmore, softly.
You can't stay with him, you know.
And the children?
We'll take them.
Oh.
Her face puckers to cry. Suddenly he starts up and puts his arms round her, holding her protectively and gently, very caressingly. She clings to him. They are silent for some moments. Blackmore, struggling, in an altered voice.
Look at me and kiss me.
Her sobs are heard distinctly. Blackmore lays his hand on her cheek, caressing her always with his hand.
My God, but I hate him. I wish either he was dead or me.
Mrs. Holroyd hides against him. Her sobs cease. After a while he continues in the same murmuring fashion.
I can't go on like it any more. I feel as if I should come in too. I can't keep away from you. I simply can't. Come with me. Come with me and leave him. If you knew what a hell it is for me to have you here and to see him. I can't go without you. I can't. It's been hell every moment for 6 months now. You say I don't love you. Perhaps I don't, for all I know about it. But oh, my God, don't keep me like it any longer. Why should he have you, and I've never had anything?
Have you never loved anybody?
No, I've tried. Kiss me of your own wish, will you?
I don't know.
Blackmore, after a pause.
Let's break clear. Let's go right away. Do you care for me?
I don't know.
She loosens herself, rises dumbly.
When do you think you will know?
She sits down helplessly.
I don't know.
Yes, you do know, really. If he was dead, should you marry me?
Don't say it.
Why not? If wishing of mine would kill him, he'd soon be out of the way.
But the children.
I'm fond of them. I shall have good money.
But he's their father.
What does that mean?
Yes, I know.
A pause.
But...
Is it him that keeps you?
No.
Then come with me, will you?
He stands waiting for her. Then he turns and takes his overcoat, pulls it on, leaving the collar turned up, ceasing to twist his cap.
Well, will you tell me tomorrow?
She goes forward and flings her arms round his neck. He suddenly kisses her passionately.
But I ought not.
She draws away a little. He will not let her go.
Yes, it's all right.
He holds her close.
Is it?
Yes, it is. It's all right.
He kisses her again. She releases herself, but holds his hand. They keep listening.
Do you love me?
What do you ask for?
Have I hurt you these months?
You haven't. And I don't care what it's been if you'll come with me.
There is a noise upstairs, and they wait.
You will soon, won't you?
She kisses him.
He's not safe.
She disengages herself and sits on the sofa. Blackmore takes a place beside her, holding her hand in both his.
You should have waited for me.
How wait?
And not have married him.
I might never have known you. I married him to get out of my place.
Why?
I was left an orphan when I was 6. My Uncle John brought me up in the Coach and Horses at Rainsworth. He'd got no children. He was good to me, but he drank. I went to Mansfield Grammar School, and he fell out with me because I wouldn't wait in the bar, and I went as nursery governess to Berryman's. And I felt I'd nowhere to go. I belonged to nowhere, and nobody cared about me. And men came after me, and I hated it. So, to get out of it, I married the first man that turned up.
And you never cared about him?
Yes, I did. I did care about him. I wanted to be a wife to him, but there's nothing at the bottom of him, if you know what I mean. You can't get anywhere with him. There's just his body and nothing else. Nothing that keeps him, no anchor, no roots, nothing satisfying. It's a horrible feeling there is about him, that nothing is safe or permanent. Nothing is anything.
And do you think you can trust me?
I think you're different from him.
Perhaps I'm not.
Mrs. Holroyd, warmly.
You are.
At any rate, we'll see. You'll come on Saturday to London?
Well, you see, there's my money. I haven't got it yet. My uncle has left me about £120.
Well, see the lawyer about it as soon as you can. I can let you have some money if you want any, but don't let us wait after Saturday.
But isn't it wrong?
Why, if you don't care for him, and the children are miserable between the two of you, which they are.
Yes.
Well, then I see no wrong. As for him, he would go one way, and only one way, whatever you do. Damn him, he doesn't matter.
No.
Well then, have done with it. Can't you cut clean of him? Can't you now?
And then the children.
They'll be all right with me and you, won't they?
Yes.
Well then, now come and have done with it. We can't keep on being ripped in two like this. We need never hear of him any more.
Yes. I love you. I do love you.
Oh, my God.
He speaks with difficulty, embracing her.
And I look at him, and then at you.
She gives a short laugh.
He's had all the chance. It's only fair, Lizzie.
My love.
There is silence. He keeps his arm round her. After hesitating, he picks up his cap.
I'll go then, at any rate. Shall you come with me?
She follows him to the door.
I'll come on Saturday.
Not now?
Curtain. End of Act 2. Act 3 of The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd by D.H. Lawrence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The third act. Scene the same. Time the following evening, about 7 o'clock. The table is half laid, with a large cup and saucer, plate, etc., ready for Holroyd's dinner, which, like all miners, he has when he comes home between 4 and 5 o'clock. On the other half of the table, Mrs. Holroyd is ironing. On the hearth stands newly baked loaves of bread. The irons hang at the fire. Jack, with a bowler hat hanging at the back of his head, parades up to the sofa, on which stands Minnie engaged in dusting a picture. She has a soiled white apron tied behind her to make a long skirt.
Good morning, missus. Any scissors or knives to grind?
Minnie, peering down from the sofa.
Oh, I can't be bothered to come downstairs. Call another day.
I shan't.
Minnie, keeping up her part.
Well, I can't come down now.
Jack stands irresolute.
Go on. You have to go and steal the baby.
I'm not.
Well, you can steal the eggs out of the fowl house.
I'm not.
Then I shan't play with you.
Jack takes off his bowler hat and flings it on the sofa. Tears come in Minnie's eyes.
Now I'm not friends.
She surveys him ruefully. After a few moments of silence, she clambers down and goes to her mother.
Ma'am, he won't play with me.
Mrs. Holroyd, crossly.
Why don't you play with her? If you begin bothering, you must go to bed.
Well, I don't want to play.
Then you must go to bed.
I don't want to.
Then what do you want, I should like to know?
I wish my father'd come.
I do.
I suppose he thinks he's paying me out. This is the third time this week he's slunk past the door and gone down to old Brinsley instead of coming in to his dinner. He'll be as drunk as a lord when he does come.
The children look at her plaintively.
Isn't he a nuisance?
I hate him. I wish he'd dropped down the pit shaft.
Jack, I never heard such a thing in my life. You mustn't say such things. It's wicked.
Well, I do.
Mrs. Holroyd, loudly.
I won't have it. He's your father, remember?
Jack, in a high voice.
Well, he's always coming home and shouting and banging on the table.
He is getting tearful and defiant.
Well, you mustn't take any notice of him.
Minnie, wistfully.
Happen if you said something nice to him, Mother. He'd happen to go to bed and not shout.
I'd hit him in the mouth.
Perhaps we'll go to another country away from him, should we?
In a ship, Mother?
In a ship, ma'am.
Yes, in a big ship where it's blue sky and water and palm trees and
dates.
When should we go?
Someday.
But who'd work for us? Who should we have for father?
You don't want a father. I can go to work for us.
I've got a lot of money now that your uncle left me.
Minnie, after a general thoughtful silence.
And would my father stop here?
Oh, he'd be all right.
But who would he live with?
I don't know. One of his paper bonnets, if he likes.
Then she could have her old bracelet back, couldn't she?
Yes, there it is on the candlestick waiting for her.
There is a sound of footsteps, then a knock at the door. The children start. Minnie, in relief.
Here he is.
Mrs. Holroyd goes to the door. Blackmore enters.
It is foggy tonight. Hello, aren't you youngsters gone to bed?
No, my father's not come home yet.
Blackmore, turning to Mrs. Holroyd.
Did he go to work then, after last night?
I suppose so. His pit things were gone when I got up. I never thought he'd go.
And he took his snap as usual?
Yes, just as usual. I suppose he's gone to the New Inn. He'd say to himself he'd pay me out. That's what he always does say. I'll pay thee up for that bit. I'll make thee regret it.
We're going to leave him.
So you think he's at the New Inn?
I'm sure he is. He'll come when he's full. He'll have a bout now, you'll see.
Go and fetch him, Mr. Blackmore.
My mother says we shall go in a ship and leave him.
Blackmore, after looking keenly at Jack, to Mrs. Holroyd.
Shall I go and see if he's at the New Inn?
No, perhaps you'd better not.
Oh, he shan't see me. I can easily manage that.
Fetch him, Mr. Blackmore.
All right, Jack.
To Mrs. Holroyd.
Shall I?
We're always pulling on you, but yes, do.
Blackmore goes out.
I wonder how long he'll be.
You come and go to bed now. You'd better be out of the way when he comes in.
And you won't say anything to him, Mother, will you?
What do you mean?
You won't begin of him, row him.
Is he to have all his own way? What would he be like if I didn't row him?
But it doesn't matter, Mother, if we're going to leave him.
But Mr. Blackmore'll come back, won't he, ma'am? And Dad won't shout before him.
Mrs. Holroyd, beginning to undress the children.
Yes, he'll come back.
Ma'am, could I have that bracelet to go to bed with?
Come and say your prayers.
They kneel, muttering in their mother's apron. Minnie suddenly lifting her head.
Can I, ma'am?
Mrs. Holroyd, trying to be stern.
Have you finished your prayers?
Yes.
If you want it, beastly thing.
She reaches the bracelet down from the mantelpiece.
Your father must have put it up there. I don't know where I left it. Suppose he'd think I was proud of it and wanted it for an ornament.
Minnie gloats over it. Mrs. Holroyd lights a candle and they go upstairs. After a few moments, the outer door opens, and there enters an old woman. She is of middling stature and wears a large grey shawl over her head. After glancing sharply round the room, she advances to the fire, warms herself, then, taking off her shawl, sits in the rocking chair. As she hears Mrs. Holroyd's footsteps, she folds her hands and puts on a lachrymose expression, turning down the corners of her mouth and arching her eyebrows.
Hello, Mother, is it you?
Yes, it's me. Haven't you finished ironing?
Not yet.
You'll have your irons red hot.
Yes, I shall have to stand them to cool.
She does so, and moves about at her ironing.
And you don't know what's become of Charles?
Well, he's not come home from work yet. I suppose he was at the New Inn. Why?
Ah, that young electrician come knocking, asking if I knew where he was. Eh? I said. I've not set eyes on him for over a week, nor his wife neither, though they pass the garden gate every time they go out. I know naught on him. I asked him what was the matter, so he said Mrs. Holroyd was anxious because he'd not come home, so I thought I'd better come and see. Is there anything up?
No more than I've told you.
It's a rum un if he's neither in the New Inn nor the Prince of Wales. I suppose something you've done set him off?
It's nothing I've done.
If he's gone off and left you, whatever shall we do? Whatever have you been doing?
He brought a couple of bright daisies here last night, 2 of those trollops from Nottingham, and I said I'd not have it.
Grandmother, sighing deeply.
You've never been able to agree.
We agreed well enough, except when he drank like a fish and came home rolling.
Grandmother, whining.
Well, what can you expect of a man as has been shut up in the pit all day? He must have a bit of relaxation.
He can have it different from that, then. At any rate, I'm sick of it.
Hey, you've a stiff neck, but it'll be bowed by you're my age.
Will it? I'd rather it were broke.
Well, there's no telling what a jealous man will do.
She shakes her head.
Nay, I think it's my place to be jealous when he brings a brazen hussy here and sits carrying on with her.
He'd no business to do that. But you know, Lizzie, he's got something on his side.
What, pray?
Well, I don't want to make any mischief, but you're my son's wife, and it's nothing but my duty to tell you. They've been saying a long time now as that young electrician is here a bit too often.
He doesn't come for my asking.
No, I don't suppose he wants for asking. But Charlie's not the man to put up with that sort of work.
Charlie put up with it? If he's anything to say, why doesn't he say it without going to other folks?
Charlie's never been near me with a word, nor has he said a word elsewhere to my knowledge. For all that, this is going to end with trouble.
In this hole, every gossiping creature thinks she's got the right to cackle about you. Sickening. And a parcel of lies.
Well, Lizzie, I've never said anything against you. Charlie's been a handful of trouble. He made my heart ache once or twice before you had him, and he's made it ache many's the time since. But it's not all on his side, you know.
Mrs. Holroyd, hotly.
No, I don't know.
You thought yourself above him, Lizzie, and you know he's not the man to stand it.
No, he's run away from it.
Grandmother, venomously.
And what man wouldn't leave a woman that allowed him to live on sufferance in the home with her when he was bringing the money home?
Sufferance? Yes, there's been a lot of letting him live on sufferance in the house with me. It is I who have lived on sufferance, for his service and pleasure. No, what he wanted was the drink, and the public house company, and because he couldn't get them here, he went out for them. That's all.
You have always been very clever at hitting things off, Lizzie. I was always sorry my youngest son married a clever woman. He only wanted a bit of coaxing and managing, and you clever women won't do it.
He wanted a slave, not a wife.
It's a pity your stomach wasn't too high for him before you had him. But no, you could have eaten him ravishing at one time.
It's a pity you didn't tell me what he was before I had him. But oh, he was all angel. You left me to find out what he really was.
Some women could have lived with him happy enough. And a fat lot you'd have thanked me for my telling.
There is a knock at the door. Mrs. Holroyd opens.
They tell me, missus, as your maester's not home yet.
No, who is it?
Ask him to step inside. Don't stand there letting the fog in.
Wrigley steps in. He is a tall, bony, very roughly hewn collier.
Good evening.
Oh, is it you, Mr. Ridgely?
In a querulous, spiteful tone to Mrs. Holroyd.
He butties along with Charlie.
Oh.
And han you seen that on him?
No. Was he all right at work?
Well, it were nowt to mention. A bit short like, hadn't much to say. I canna make out what he's done with hisself.
He is manifestly uneasy. Does not look at the two women.
And did he come up with the same bantle with you?
No, he dinna. As I were coming out of the stall, I shouted, "Art coming, Charlie, we're off." And he said, "I'm coming in a minute." He were just finishing a stint like, and he wanted to get it set. And he'd been a bit roughish in his temper like, so I thought he didn't want to walk to the bottom with us.
Grandmother, wailing.
And what's he gone and done to himself?
Nay, missus, you munna ask me that. He's not done out as I know on. Only I were thinking, something had happened to him, like, seeing as nobody's had any knowledge of him coming up.
What is the matter, Mr. Wrigley? Tell us it out.
I cannot do that, missus. It seems as if he never come up to pit, as far as we can make out. Happen a bit of stuff fell and pinned him.
Grandmother, wailing.
And have you left him lying down there in the pit, poor thing?
Wrigley, uneasily.
I couldn't say for certain where he is.
Mrs. Holroyd, agitated.
Oh, it's very likely not very bad, Mother. Don't let us run to meet trouble.
We have to hope for the best, missus, on all of us.
Grandmother, wailing.
They'll bring him home. I know they will. Smashed up and broke. And one of my sons they've burnt down pit till the flesh dropped off him, and one was shot till his shoulder was all of a mush, and they brought him home to me. And now there's this.
Mrs. Holroyd, shuddering.
Oh, don't, Mother.
Appealingly to Wrigley.
You don't know that he's hurt?
Wrigley, shaking his head.
I cannot tell you.
Mrs. Holroyd, in a high hysterical voice.
Then what is it?
Wrigley, very uneasy.
I cannot tell you, but young electrician, Mr. Blackmore, he rung down to the night deputy, and it seems as though there's been a fall or summat.
Lizzie, you parted from him in anger. You little knowed how'd you meet him again?
Wrigley, making an effort.
Well, I'd happen best be going to see what's betide.
He goes out.
I'm sure I've had my share of bad luck, I have. I'm sure I've brought up 5 lads in the pit through accidents and troubles, and now there's this. The Lord has treated me very hard, very hard. It's a blessing, Lizzie, as you've got a bit of money, else what would have become of the children?
Well, if he's badly hurt, there'll be the union pay and sick pay. We shall manage, and perhaps it's not very much.
There's no knowing, but what they'll be carrying him to die at the hospital.
Oh, don't say so, Mother. It won't be so bad, you'll see.
How much money have you, Lizzie, coming?
I don't know. Not much over £100.
Grandmother, shaking her head.
And what's that? What's that?
Mrs. Holroyd, sharply.
Hush!
Grandmother, crying.
Why? What?
Mrs. Holroyd opens the door. In the silence can be heard the pulsing of the fan engine. Then the driving engine chuffs rapidly. There is a shirr of brakes on the rope as it descends.
That's twice they've sent the chair down. I wish we could see. Hark!
What is it?
Yes, it stopped at the gate. It's the doctor's.
Grandmother, coming to the door.
What, Lizzie?
The doctor's motor.
She listens acutely.
Dare you stop here, Mother, while I run up to the top and see?
You'd better not go, Lizzie, you'd better not. A woman's best away.
It is unbearable to wait.
Come in and shut the door. It's a cold that gets in your bones.
She goes in.
Perhaps while he's in bed we shall have time to change him. It's an ill wind brings no good. He'll happen be a better man.
Well, you can but try. Many a woman's thought the same.
Oh dear, I wish somebody would come. He's never been hurt since we were married.
No, he's never had a bad accident all the years he's been in the pit. He's been luckier than most. but everybody has it sooner or later.
Mrs. Holroyd, shivering.
It is a horrid night.
Grandmother, querulous.
Yes, come your ways in.
Hark!
There is a quick sound of footsteps. Blackmore comes into the light of the doorway.
They're bringing him.
Mrs. Holroyd, quickly putting her hand over her breast.
What is it?
You can't tell anything's the matter with him. It's not marked him at all.
Oh, what a blessing. And is it much?
Well,
what is it?
It's the worst.
Who is it? What does he say?
Mrs. Holroyd sinks on the nearest chair with a horrified expression. Blackmore pulls himself together and enters. He is very pale.
I came to tell you they're bringing him home.
And you said it wasn't very bad, did you?
No, I said it was as bad as it could be.
Mrs. Holroyd, rising and crossing to her mother-in-law, flings her arms round her. In a high voice,
Oh, Mother, what shall we do? What shall we do?
You don't mean to say he's dead?
Yes.
Grandmother, staring.
God help us. And how was it?
Some stuff fell.
Grandmother, rocking herself and her daughter-in-law, both weeping.
Oh, God, have mercy on us. Oh, God, have mercy on us. Some stuff fell on him, and he'd not even time to cry for mercy. Oh, God, spare him. Oh, what shall we do for comfort? To be taken straight out of his sins. Oh, Lizzie, to think he should be cut off in his wickedness. He's been a bad lad of late, he has, poor lamb. He's gone very wrong of late years, poor dear lamb, very wrong. Oh, Lizzie, what's to become of him now? If only you'd have tried to be different with him.
Mrs. Holroyd, moaning.
Don't, Mother, don't. I can't bear it.
Blackmore, cold and clear.
Where will you have him laid? The men will be here in a moment.
Mrs. Holroyd, starting up.
They can carry him up to bed.
It's no good taking him upstairs. You'll have to wash him and lay him out.
Mrs. Holroyd, startled.
Well,
he's in his pit dirt.
He is, bless him. We'd better have him down here, Lizzie, where we can handle him.
Yes.
She begins to put the tea things away, but drops the sugar out of the basin, and the lumps fly broadcast.
Never mind, I'll pick those up. You put the children's clothes away.
Mrs. Holroyd stares witless around. The grandmother sits rocking herself and weeping. Blackmore clears the table, putting the pots in the scullery. He folds the white tablecloth and pulls back the table. The door opens. Mrs. Holroyd utters a cry. Wrigley enters.
They're bringing him now, missus.
Oh.
Wrigley, simply.
There must have been a fall directly after we left him.
Mrs. Holroyd, frowning, horrified.
No, no.
Wrigley, to Blackmore.
It fell aback at him and shot him in as you might shot a loaf into oven. It never touched him.
Mrs. Holroyd, staring distractedly.
Well, then.
You see, it come on him as close as a trap on a mouse, and get him no air, and what with the gas, it smothered him. And it wouldn't be so very long about it, neither.
Mrs. Holroyd, quiet with horror.
Oh.
Oh, dear, dear. Ah, dear, dear.
Wrigley, looking hard at her.
I was not to know what had happened.
Grandmother, not heeding him, but weeping all the time.
But the Lord gave him time to repent. He'd have a few minutes to repent. Aye, I hope he did, I hope he did. Else what was to become of him? The Lord cut him off in his sins, but he gave him time to repent.
Wrigley looks away at the wall. Blackmore has made a space in the middle of the floor.
If you'll take the rocking chair off the end of the rug, Mrs. Holroyd, I can pull it back a bit from the fire and we can lay him on that.
Grandmother, petulantly.
What's the good of messing about?
She moves.
It suffocated him.
Wrigley, shaking his head, briefly.
Yes, and the after damp.
He'd be dead in a few minutes.
No, oh, think.
You mustn't think.
Wrigley, suddenly.
They're coming.
Mrs. Holroyd stands at bay. The grandmother half rises. Wrigley and Blackmore efface themselves as much as possible. A man backs into the room, bearing the feet of the dead man, which are shod in great pit boots. As the head bearer comes awkwardly past the table, the coat with which the body is covered slips off, revealing Holroyd in his pit dirt, naked to the waist. Manager, a little stout, white-bearded man.
Mind now, mind. Aye, missus. What a job, indeed it is.
Sharply.
Where mun they put him?
Mrs. Holroyd, turning her face aside from the corpse.
Lay him on the rug.
Steady now. Do it steady.
Second bearer, rising and pressing back his shoulders.
By Guy, but heing's heavy.
Joe, I'll back my life of that.
Ah, Mr. Chambers, what's this affliction on my old age? You kept your sons out of the pit, but all mine's in. And to think of the trouble I've had, to think of the trouble that's come out of Brinsley pit to me.
It has that, missus. You seem to have had more than your share. I'll admit it, you have.
Mrs. Holroyd, who has been staring at the men.
It is too much.
Blackmore frowns. Wrigley glowers at her.
You never knowed such a thing in your life. Here's a man, holding a stint, just finishing.
He puts himself as if in the holer's position, gesticulating freely.
And a lot of stuff falls behind him, clean as a whistle, shuts him up safe as a worm in a nut, and never touches him. Never knowed such a thing in your life.
Oh!
It never hurt him, never touched him.
Yes, but how long would he be?
She makes a sweeping gesture. The manager looks at her and will not help her out.
How long would it take to kill him?
Nay, I canna tell ye. He didn't seem to have strived much to get out, did he, Joe?
No, not as far as I'm saying.
You look at his hands, you'll see then. He'd none high room to swing the pick.
The manager goes on his knees. Mrs. Holroyd, shuddering.
Oh, don't.
Aye, the nails is broken a bit.
Mrs. Holroyd, clenching her fists.
Don't!
He'd be sure to make a bit of a fight, but the gas would soon get hold of him. Aye, it's an awful thing to think of. It is indeed.
Mrs. Holroyd, her voice breaking.
I can't bear it.
Dear, we none on us know what's coming next.
Mrs. Holroyd, getting hysterical.
Oh, it's too awful, it's too awful.
You'll disturb the children.
And you don't want them down here.
He'd no business to have been left, you know.
And what man does think we're going to sit down on his hams and wait for a chap as wouldn't say thank you for his company? He'd been ready to fall out with the flicker of the candle. So who does think we're going to stop when we knowed he'd only kept on so as to get shot of us?
That's quite right, Bill, quite right. But there you are.
And if we'd stopped, what good would that have done?
No, happen not.
For not known.
I'm saying naught again thee, neither one road nor the other.
There is general silence. Then to Mrs. Holroyd.
I should think the inquest will be the new inn tomorrow, missus. I'll let you know.
Will there have to be an inquest?
Yes, there'll have to be an inquest. Shall you want anybody in to stop with you tonight?
No.
Well then, we'd best be going. I'll send my missus down first thing in the morning. It's a bad job it is. You'll be all right then?
Yes.
Well, good night then. Good night all.
Good night, good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
The manager, followed by the two bearers, goes out, closing the door.
It's like this, missus. I should never have gone if he hadn't wanted us to.
Yes, I know.
He wanted to come up and send.
Mrs. Holroyd, wearily.
I know how it was, Mr. Wrigley.
Yes.
Nobody could foresee.
Wrigley, shaking his head.
No. If there's that, missus, as you want.
Yes, I think there isn't anything.
Wrigley, after a moment.
Well, good night. I've worked in the same store 4 years now.
Yes.
Well, good night, missus.
Good night.
Good night.
The grandmother all this time has been rocking herself to and fro, moaning and murmuring beside the dead man. When Wrigley has gone, Mrs. Holroyd stands staring distractedly before her. She has not yet looked at her husband.
Have you got the things ready, Lizzie?
What things?
To lay the child out.
Mrs. Holroyd, she shudders.
No, what?
Haven't you put him by a pair of white stockings, nor a white shirt?
He's got a white cricketing shirt, but not white stockings.
Then he'll have to have his father's. Let me look at the shirt, Lizzie.
Mrs. Holroyd takes one from the dresser drawer.
This'll never do. An old canvas thing with a turned-down collar. I's left to fetch his father's.
Suddenly,
you don't want no other woman to touch him, to wash him and lay him out, do you?
Mrs. Holroyd, weeping.
No.
Then I'll fetch him his father's gear. We mustn't let him set. He'll be that heavy, bless him.
She takes her shawl.
I shan't be more than a few minutes, and the young fellow can stop here till I come back.
Can't I go for you, Mrs. Holroyd?
No, you couldn't find the things. We'll wash him as soon as I get back, Lizzie.
All right.
She watches her mother-in-law go out. Then she starts, goes in the scullery for a bowl, in which she pours warm water. She takes a flannel and soap and towel. She stands, afraid to go any farther.
Well.
This is a judgment on us.
Why?
On me it is.
How?
It is.
Blackmore shakes his head.
Yesterday you talked of murdering him.
Well.
Now we've done it.
How?
He'd have come up with the others if he hadn't felt me murdering him.
But we can't help it.
It's my fault.
Don't be like that.
Mrs. Holroyd, looking at him, then indicating her husband.
I daren't see him.
No?
I've killed him, that is all.
No, you haven't.
Yes, I have.
We couldn't help it.
If he hadn't felt, if he hadn't known, he wouldn't have stayed. He'd have come up with the rest.
Well, and even if it was so, we can't help it now.
But we've killed him.
I'm tired.
Yes.
Blackmore, after a pause.
Shall I stay?
I daren't be alone with him.
Blackmore, sitting down.
No.
I don't love him. Now he's dead. I don't love him. He lies like he did yesterday.
I suppose, being dead, I don't know.
I think he'd better go.
Blackmore, rising.
Tell me.
Yes.
You want me to go?
No, but do go.
They look at each other.
I shall come tomorrow.
He goes out. Mrs. Holroyd stands very stiff, as if afraid of the dead man. Then she stoops down and begins to sponge his face, talking to him.
My dear, oh, my dear. I can't bear it, my dear. You shouldn't have done it. You shouldn't have done it. Oh, I can't bear it for you. Why couldn't I do anything for you? The children's father. My dear, I wasn't good to you. But you shouldn't have done this to me. dear, oh dear. Did it hurt you? Oh, my dear, it hurt you. Oh, I can't bear it. No, things aren't fair. We went wrong, my dear. I never loved you enough. I never did. What a shame for you. It was a shame. But you didn't try. I would have loved you. I tried hard. What a shame for you. It was so cruel for you. You couldn't help it, my dear, my dear. You couldn't help it. And I can't do anything for you, and it hurt you so.
She weeps bitterly, so her tears fall on the dead man's face. Suddenly she kisses him.
My dear, what can I do for you? What can I?
She weeps as she wipes his face gently. Grandmother enters, puts a bundle on the table, takes off her shawl.
You're not all by yourself?
Yes.
It's a wonder you're not frightened. You've not washed his face.
Why should I be afraid of him? Now, mother.
Grandmother, weeping.
Ay, poor lamb, I can't see as ever you could have had reason to be frightened of him, Lizzie.
Yes, once.
Oh, but he went wrong, and he was a taking lad as ever was.
She cries pitifully.
And when I waked his father up and told him, he sat up in bed staring over his whiskers and said should he come up, but when I'd managed to find the shirt and things he was still in bed. You don't know what it is to live with a man that has no feeling. But you've washed him, Lizzie?
I was finishing his head.
Let me do it, child.
I'll finish that.
Poor lamb, poor dear lamb. Yet I wouldn't wish him back, Lizzie. He must have died peaceful, Lizzie. He seems to be smiling. He always had such a rare smile on him. Not that he's smiled much of late.
I loved him for that.
Ay, my poor child, my poor child.
He looks nice, mother.
I hope he made his peace with the Lord.
Yes.
If he hadn't time to make his peace with the Lord, I've no hopes of him. Dear oh me, dear oh me. Is there another bit of flannel anywhere?
Mrs. Holroyd rises and brings a piece. The grandmother begins to wash the breast of the dead man.
Well, I hope you'll be true to his children at least, Lizzie.
Mrs. Holroyd weeps. The old woman continues her washing.
And he's fair as a lily. Did you ever see a man with a whiter skin? And flesh as fine as the driven snow? He's beautiful, he is, the lamb. Many's the time I've looked at him, and I've felt proud of him, I have. And now he lies here. And such arms on him. Look at the vaccination marks, Lizzie. When I took him to be vaccinated, he had a little pink bonnet with a feather.
Weeps.
Don't cry, my girl, don't. Sit up and wash him at that side, or we shall never have him done. Oh, Lizzie!
Mrs. Holroyd, sitting up, startled.
What?
Look at his poor hand.
She holds up the right hand. The nails are bloody.
Oh, no. Oh, no, no.
Both women weep. Grandmother, after a while.
We maun get on, Lizzie.
Mrs. Holroyd, sitting up.
I can't touch his hands.
But I'm his mother. There's nothing I couldn't do for him.
I don't care. I don't care.
Prithee, Lizzie. I don't want thee going off, Lizzie.
Mrs. Holroyd, moaning.
Oh, what shall I do?
Why, go thee and get his feet washed. He's sitting stiff, and how shall we get him laid out?
Mrs. Holroyd, sobbing, goes, kneels at the miner's feet, and begins pulling off the great boots.
There's hardly a mark on him. What a man he is. I've had some fine sons, Lizzie. I've had some big men of sons.
He was always a lot whiter than me, and he used to chaff me.
But his poor hands. I used to thank God for my children, but they're rods of trouble, Lizzie, they are. Unfasten his belt, child. Me mun get his things off soon, or else we'll have such a job.
Mrs. Holroyd, having dragged off the boots, rises. She is weeping. Curtain. End of Act 3. End of The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd by D.H. Lawrence.